me a favor? Could you give me some good advice, or even the best advice, on how to determine the materiality of a breach?
Well, first, does the CISO needs to know, what the data is, how much of it is, how many records, and how important it is, and also that it isn't their job to determine materiality. They should be working with the rest of the C levels and the legal and CFO.
Ah, very good tip. Now, Dustin, I'm going to ask you the opposite question. Could you give me some bad advice on determining the materiality of a breach?
Oh yeah, you go to the attacker's website, you offer them a couple $1 million, you pull down the data and you start counting the records. That would be the worst possible to determine the
Oh,
materiality
that
of a
is pretty
breach.
bad. Dustin, I think you've thrown a challenge. Jason, could you give me worse advice, Jason, than what
It's a good
Dustin
one.
just said?
That's a good one. I would, because the SEC says reasonable investor, I would call like my grandmother who's invested in the company and say, "What do you think? Would you care?" And if she says, "Yeah, it's material," or then it's basically that. Then it's material. She's a reasonable investor.
No, no, no. See, Jason, I thought you were going to dust off your mad hacker skills. You're going to hack the hacker and steal the data back, is what I thought you were going to tell
Oh,
me.
Might have done that
oh,
before.
wait, we got a worse one. The worstest, if you will. Let's start a show.
Get ready. It's Super Cyber Friday.
Welcome, everybody, to Super Cyber Friday. Our topic of conversation today, we were just talking about it, hacking the materiality of a data breach. An hour of critical thinking about when a breach is material, or not, for that matter. Hey, our guest today, you just saw them. That's Dustin Wilcox. He is the VP CISO of Elevance Health. And Jason Clark, Chief Strategy Officer for Cyera. Guess what? Cyera, they're our wonderful sponsor for today's event. Thank you so much, Cyera, for sponsoring. All right, lots of different ways to participate. We have the chat room. Our bad idea is how to discover the extent of a breach. I want a bad suggestion on how to do that. But for our 10% better tip, how to responsibly determine breach materiality, want your tips on that? You can join us on video at any time to ask a question or make a comment by just typing "Bring Me On." We'll try to get you on. Ask a question for our guests. Submit a question. This is something new if you didn't come last week. Submit a question for our Super Cyber Meetup, which is the tail end, which is on Discord. And that is at the end of the show. If you haven't been to that, please stick around to the end of the show. We want to meet you. And if you actually submit questions, it's great. I read out each question and we try to get everyone to answer it. And it can be related to what we're talking about today or just something that's burning on your mind. You'd like feedback from the community. And also submit, after you ask a question for our guests, you can also vote for your favorite question as well. Just a few extra things. Today's schedule. We did the good advice, bad advice. We'll play the bad idea and the 10% tips. We'll play the public interest, Department of Yes. I will make a request for your questions. By the way, type meetup : for those questions. You'll just type the word meetup, and I'll remind you again. Then we'll go last questions and answer. Then we'll have our meetup. And the last thing I want to mention is the link at the bottom of the screen is our event next week, which is Hacking SOC Automation. You can click on that link. That'll open another window. You can register for the event. It will not take you out of the event. That'll be up there the whole time. Please click on that and register for that. All right, let's get into our topic at hand. Enough of that nonsense. Jason, Dustin, thank you so much for talking to me. So the reason we're talking about this issue is this question of materiality was very vaguely put into the SEC documentation, and it's kind of thrown everybody in a tizzy. I'm going to start with you, Dustin. Jason, you gave me a good answer before, but I'm going to ask you, Dustin, and Jason, you'll give this answer too. When you think materiality, what's your answer to that question?
I mean, there are really lots of different ways to think about materiality. And for me, being a healthcare CISO, we really have to look at it in terms of the impact on the care to the end patient, to the member, their access to care. So we look at it from multiple lenses. There is the financial lens, which is what is going to be the impact on our potential impact on our stock price. There's also what will be the impact on ability to access care. For me, that's the much more important measure.
Okay, so it's relevant per industry. Jason, how do you answer that materiality
Same. I
question?
mean, it's every industry is different. I mean, you're obviously publicly traded, you have SEC aspects. If you're kind of FDA regulates the food and drugs, and so if you get to report if somebody's died because of a medical device, et cetera. The Europe has other kind of double double trigger materialities. But I mean, in the end, it's the overall impact that you need to measure. And again, that's not for the CISO to determine. They just need to provide evidence, around some of the aspects.
All right. So now, one of the things that I've heard about why the SEC did this, and agree, disagree, I think we're maybe just postulating here, is they don't know the answer either to this question, that they purposely made it vague. So we would all kind of help them figure the answer to this out. Dustin, do you think that is the case of like, we don't really know? What do you guys think? Do you think that's what happened?
I do. And not only that, I suspect that they did so expecting then the SEC to put some more specificity around it by industry vertical, right? Mm-hmm. But we won't talk about politics, but there was a recent Supreme Court ruling around the Chevron precedent that's going to basically take away the SEC's right to do that. So now it's going to have to be legislated at some level what exactly materiality means.
By the way, I don't know. I know there are actually numbers to this, but I know it's pretty tight. Dr. X is asking, what is the SEC reporting time for a breach? And he's also asking, what is the HIPAA reporting time for a breach? I don't know the HIPAA, but I remember the whole thing with the SEC was quite a short timeline. Do either of you remember what that was? Dustin,
yeah, it's definition of material. Yeah, it depends on when you determine materiality. Once you determine materiality, you issue an 8K. I'm going to forget the exact amount of time off the top of my head, but it's one of those things I could look up if I needed to. It's within something like 48 hours. It's pretty quick.
Yeah, 40. But that's when you determine materiality. So, okay, so that can you quote hide behind that? Well, we didn't figure it out for 6 months. I mean, is that doable?
Well, we have seen. I mean, David, we've seen all kinds of examples of people figuring it out and hiding behind it, right? And we've seen materiality determinations that have come months after the breach happened and after the breach was made public. We've seen materiality determinations come after a determination that it wasn't material. So in that sense, they found new information, and the new information raised the materiality and so on. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. And again, it's the vagueness of the rule that is creating this ability to work your way around it and do it yourself. I believe the better approach is to let's have an equation for determining materiality for my business. Let's execute on that equation if the bad thing happens. And then if the number rises above the bar of materiality, report it as material.
By the way, Jason, you actually have an equation for financial materiality. We were talking about this before. Can you walk us through that? And by the way, the answer from the chat room is it's 4 days from the SEC. Go ahead.
I mean, the example of GAAP is as a 5% material to your financials, right? And so anything under that doesn't necessarily have to be reported as material. But I think that the issue here is kind of what you guys are both hitting on, is that the vagueness creates anxiety, especially for the CISO, right? Because I think that there's times where other parts of the business might want to slow down the reporting. Okay, let's look at this a bunch of different ways. And I think that a lot of the CISOs feel personal liability from a brand perspective and legal and financial perspective. And so that creates this tension. And so there's a bunch of aspects around it.
Mm-hmm. By the way, just reminding everybody, you can get your questions in. In fact, I see some questions are coming in already. Well, let me go to my own questions. So, let's back it up. There is a problem of discovering materiality because a lot of organizations don't know how to actually do this. And Jason, I want you to sort of approach this, because this is what we were talking about, is you just need to know your data. And that's a major problem that a lot of organizations have. Yes, Jason?
Yeah. I mean, so, the one, there's a big speed problem in determining this. Obviously, once you know that there's some type of bad actor, et cetera, it is then, all right, well, everybody's focusing on who's the bad actor, how long have they been there, at lateral movement, all that, how they get in, are they still in? But then there's the parallel conversation of what is the data, how important is that data, how many records is it? And it's not, to me, the materiality it's not just material to regulate, it's just material to your customers. What's your contract? If you're B2B, it's all of your customer contracts that can have a large varying degree of materiality that you have to report to Dustin, if you're a vendor to Dustin as an example, right? And so determining that you need to have technology in place to be able to do that, because as people, it takes a lot of time to do that manually and millions of dollars, because you'll have the big four and outside counsel sitting there going manually. If 200 of your executives OneDrives were ransomware, just imagine those big four and lawyers would have to sit down with every single one of those executives of any company and say, okay, let's walk through your OneDrive. Oh, wow, you've got 50,000 files from 10 years here. We have to go through every single one of them. What's embarrassing? What's you have to look at every single aspect. That would be a lot of money and a lot of time of everybody's, versus having a technology that can already have been there and can give you an answer at least to 90% degree much faster, and you know where to zero in on.
Yeah, go ahead, Dustin.
Jason, let me jump in on that too, because this was a hard problem 20 years ago when data was being digitized, right? Because the growth of data was happening so quickly, and it's just become exponentially worse problem as the technology architectures have themselves duplicated. We've gone from premise to cloud, data is multiplied over. Along with that, we've gone digital, data is multiplied in different forms. Now we've got data going into all these new data formats, things like JSON, things like vector databases and whatnot. And what that all counts to is not just is the volume of data growing, but the data is being multiplied into different regions, different spaces, and different technologies.
Exactly. It's the fastest growing attack surface, really, right? It's data, and it's driven by all the reasons that everybody knows, but it's not talked about as the fastest growing attack surface or even the largest attack surface, but it's the majority of what the bad guy's after.
I want to talk about a little bit about the double-edged sword, though, of AI information, because one of the things we've talked about, Jason, is that this classification of data really could not have happened at a sort of a reasonable level without AI, because we've tried to classify data, human level, and it's meager at best. AI allows this to happen at scale and very quickly and in real time. But as your colleague Lamont Orange mentioned on one of our recordings, is that once you're introducing AI and the AI data level that goes on top of it, that's a new level of thing that you have to protect on top of it. So that it's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that, yes, we're classifying it, but this new AI that data has been created has its own sensitivities attached to it as well. So is this making life better or worse for us?
Both. I mean, it's temporarily, it's exposing that we've been really, really bad at over giving permissions and not really understanding our data and where it is and how it's used. I mean, so it's exposing that. I think people are starting to focus on that in a good way. Now, on the flip side, the fact is that we've been trying to do classification and discovery for 20-something years in our careers, and it's been impossible. And I do believe that because of AI, and I'll use the example of if I took a picture of somebody, if you wrote on a notepad, hey, this is our M&A strategy for company X, and we want to acquire these 5 companies at this price, or if you took a picture of a network diagram, none of those would get caught in a DLP and tell you, oh yeah, this is a big deal. Versus if you just simply took a picture of that, you could draw it on your whiteboard. It took a picture of that and sent it to ChatGPT-4, and it would tell you what it is. That's game changing from a classification standpoint, and removes a lot of the human element.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know though that AI is creating a new problem. What it's doing is creating a new data source. Right. So I would encourage people not to look at AI as a different type of data problem. It's just another data source we're going to have to protect.
But that just having a new data source is yet something else you have to protect. I mean, it's a new problem to that level. It's just like, more data to protect.
So let's just say this. It's not a new problem. 100% right.
It's an old problem with more to it.
Exposing an old problem more because all of a sudden with using Copilot, all of a sudden you care about the permissions that you've over permissioned.
Yes.
Whereas before people kind of said, it's not that big of a deal. You didn't have events or incidents because of it. Now you can.
Very good.
Well, I sweat the small stuff though. I've cared about that for a long time. I think it's made it a whole lot harder though, because now where I've failed to pick up the little crumbs of permission that stuck around. I've settled the big part of that problem, and where I haven't settled the small part of that problem, now becomes a much bigger problem for me.
Yeah.
All right, we got our first game.
Do you know what others are thinking? on the public interest.
All right, gentlemen, you may or may not played this game before, but it's simple, and you're going to see in just a second. I will just say there are 4 questions. Pretty simple, but very difficult to get all 4 correct. Our audience likes to play along, so please play along. We just asked you, of these 3 terms, what do you think get the most average monthly search queries? What do you think, A, B, or C?
Gosh,
I'm gonna go C.
I'm the same. I was like C, then B, then A. Let's see.
C, B, and A. I'm just going to be a contrarian. And by the way, I didn't create this thing. Our producer, Rich, did. So I'm going to say B. So you're going C for SEC, B for FTC. I'm saying B. Let's see what the correct answer it is. It is C. All right. You're both on the board with 1. You're 1 for 1 so far. Let's see how we do. SEC has overlap with football. That's good. Yeah, that's the other thing. Keep in mind that these terms, not necessarily cybersecurity terms, or SEC is not necessarily cyber, but that they can be used in multiple contexts. All right. Breach, response, or disclosure, what gets more queries?
Response.
Breach.
All right. Breach for you, D. E, response. I'm going to go disclosure. I'm going to split it. So we each have 1 here. Let's see how this goes. Breach, response, disclosure. And the correct answer is response. So was that you, Dustin? For which would you take?
No, that was Jason. I took
Jason.
breach.
Okay, Jason. All right. Jason is 2 for 2. I have 0. You've got 1, Dustin. All right. You're doing pretty well, Jason. Let's see. Here we go. Third one. And by the way, we have different letters because our audience is like a few seconds lagging behind us. So that's why you see different letters here. Okay. Materiality, threshold, or transparency. What do you think?
Materiality.
I think transparency.
I'm actually going to go with Jason on this. I'm going transparency too. I think it's I. The correct answer is... Oh, we all lose.
Wow.
It's threshold.
Wow.
And materiality, look how low that is. Oh, my God. All right, nobody cares about materiality.
4,300 of those were me, David.
I think that's pretty much lawyers and CISOs. Right?
That's good. Well, there you go. All right, last one. Jason's not going to go for 4 for 4, but let's see if he goes 3 for 4. All right, capital, investors, or markets. Oh, this is a pretty general tough one. What do you think?
Capital.
Yeah, capital.
I'm going to go investors. I'm going investors. Let's see. Correct answer is capital. Very good. Jason, 3 for 4, 2 for 4 for Dustin, and I think I just got 1 is all I got on this. Did I get 1? Maybe I didn't get 1. I think I got 1. I can't remember now, but I didn't do well. Anyways, excellent job. Did anyone in the chat room go 4 for 4? I did get 1. David said Rich. So excellent job, Jason. All right, Jason, I want to ask you a question because Cyera, I want to give you an opportunity to explain, specifically talk about what Cyera is doing in the context of this conversation about materiality of a data breach. And I'll set you up a little bit because I understand a little bit. What's pretty kind of interesting and fascinating about what Cyera is doing is it's about classifying data. And that is the keystone to literally everything. In that once you're capable of classifying your data, everything else becomes actually quite easy. But it's the classifying of the data that is the most critical. And because we have AI tools to be able to classify data, it can be done in mass. I think I did a pretty good explanation. Please add to that, Jason.
Yeah, it's about knowing where all your data is at scale, everywhere, easily, and then classifying its importance without having to have human intervention, right? Again, at scale using AI. But then the reason why that's so important is everything else downstream. And like Dustin and I have talked about, security strategy for many, many years around its, minimize the attack surface, complicate unauthorized access, rapidly detect and respond to and contain incidents, operationalize your program and align to business. But if you don't do the first thing, which to me is know thyself, which is your data, if you don't know all of your data and how important it is, it makes it really hard to create the controls downstream of, well, if you don't know everywhere your data is and where it's, then how are you going to minimize that attack surface? How are you going to complicate unauthorized access? How are you going to rapidly detect an exfiltration if you don't know what's important or how important that data is or where it is? And again, over and over again. So what we've done in my view, as security programs, is we've made it really, really hard on ourselves because the technology didn't exist to know our data like we can now because of these new inventions. AI being a big driver, and Cyera has, really capitalized on that by inventing solutions that can discover, classify, and then inform the rest of your controls, receive those signals, send signals back, and really start to be the brain of kind of your data security program.
And literally, you're just echoing what I said in your introduction. You said that is the keystone. Once you can label and discover it, it allows all the downstream effects to happen. If you can't do that, don't waste your time on the downstream, because you could try it, but it's for sure going to be wrong. That's a big issue. Anyways, I wanted
David,
Jason.
That's the hair, though. David, I'm going to split that hair with you.
Sure.
Though you said classification was the cornerstone. I would say that discovery is the cornerstone. Discovery.
I'm sorry. Let me put. I meant to say discovery and classification, and I agree totally, 100% there. Does it?
And I love the bad idea from Wilder. He's like, the bad idea is implement DLP, because exactly, you're going and implementing a control without even knowing what's important.
Yeah, that could have. All right. The reason I bring all this up is, and I'm making it visible right now, is I just put a poll up. So if you click on, there's a little icon on the right-hand side that has like a little pseudo bar chart, tiny little, it's the third icon down. Click on that. And if you would like a warm introduction to the people at Cyera, to understand more about what Dustin clarifying, discovery, and also classification, how they can help, and then with all the downstream effects, please go respond to that poll. And that will be up for the entire event here. Please submit some more questions for us. We want more questions. Well, Andrew Wilder said, is DLP a good use of resources? And you flat out, and I think Andrew said the answer is no. Yes.
Once, if you don't know where your data is and how important it is, it's not. But if as a later down control, downstream, it's an important control. It's just a matter of people are doing it like they think that's their data security strategy is DLP. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
yeah, it's a commodity control, right? It's really good for doing some very basic tasks, keeping credit card numbers from going out in emails, right? Other than that, no, it's never going to be a breach, a tool to prevent breaches, large-scale data breaches.
And by the way, you bring up a really good point, Dustin, is the things that we were good historically classifying have been credit card numbers and social security numbers. We're pretty darn good on that. Like that, we don't need a lot of help with. It's the everything else, the scenario of the image that you presented, because like we all know, certain data points by themselves don't create gravity. It's the connection and the context of many of them that all of a sudden, oh, now we have a sensitive issue here. And I remember interviewing a hacker just 3-4 years ago, and and we all kind of know this. The big difference between today and say 10 years ago is how much more we know about each other. And it's an immense amount. It's huge. I'm assuming, Dustin, you deal with this. You've seen this in your own work, is that the essentially the biography we have of each individual is far more sensitive. Yes?
Oh, yeah, and you're talking about data aggregation as a problem, right? It's not just the individual pieces of data by themselves, but taken in context to the other data that might be involved in the breach as well, that really creates this issue that is much more compounding to the to the impact that breach can have on your customers, and in my case, on the patients.
All right, let's get into, by the way, more questions, and please send in all your questions. All right, from Peter, I haven't even read this, Peter Canuck. What is your opinion? Do you need additional DLP policies once you have classification and policies for classified data? So I guess, how would you answer that, Jason?
I'm just reading that now. Sorry, I was typing an answer. So
it's all right.
Yeah.
So it's about policies around data.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer, Jason.
Sure.
From my perspective, if your DLP technology is sophisticated enough to work on things like hashes or other ways that you can identify otherwise unidentifiable data, data that's not string data, right? If you have the ability to do it on hashes, yeah, it's a great opportunity to add some, I think, very fine-grained policies to your DLP to look for that data you've discovered.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the unstructured data is the big gap I think all of us are really dealing with. And the simple example to me is, I'm just use one person. You're a publicly traded company. Your CEO's OneDrive email box and every file that they've shared with anybody. That and if they've been in their job for a long time, they've a lot of things have been copied to them. It could be everything from very embarrassing things that's happened, that HR's had to deal with, to to any type of lawsuit, to every contract with every customer. And then you start to get to, okay, they downloaded all from Workday, all of the employee salaries as because for review process. I mean, all of that stuff that we keep in structured environments. Generally, executives want to work in Excel, right, or in Word, and that stuff's all sitting there. And you have years and years of it pile up, and nobody really knows how big of a deal that is. And it's a lot of embarrassing stuff and regulated stuff.
Let me ask you, Jason, does Cyera work with like data lakes like what AWS is doing?
Yeah, most all the data lakes and Snowflake, et cetera, AWS, GCP, Azure, all the cloud players, and then the databases on-prem and the storage environments on-prem, et cetera. Right, so it's really just trying to get to your data everywhere it is. That's the goal.
All right. By the way, I'm gonna admonish the community right now that I've just been informed by our producer, Rich Straffolino, that we have no 10% better tips. That means, oh, wait a second, I take that back. I just see Andrew Wilder. We have one 10% better tip, which is work with your CFO and general counsel to agree on materiality before you have a data breach. That is a damn good tip.
That is a good
Jason,
one. I agree. That's a good, that's good. That's smart. That's we should all do kind of almost a readiness assessment of how the CISO would be able to respond to being able to provide the information around materiality. Pick a couple environments. Use your top 200 execs OneDrives. Just use that example. Run a readiness assessment against that. I'd be happy to help with that. And then do the same thing then with your executive team and the legal team on how they would perform on that. So I think just like we've been doing tabletop exercises forever around IR, I think we should do the same thing for these SEC requirements.
By the way, I know none of us are lawyers here, so I may be asking a question for which we do need legal counsel to answer this question. But this good advice that Andrew offers of determine what it is. Would a history of having that conversation and determining internally, this organization determined that X% of this, X% of that, X% of that, that's material. Do you think that would satisfy the SEC, even though none of us are lawyers? Dustin, any idea here?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've had that very conversation. I've had it, and I try not to talk too much about my own company when I'm in these conversations. But I can tell you we've had exactly that conversation. Not only that, what are the artifacts you want to have? You want to create each time you have that conversation, so you can show the thought process you've gone through in order to determine materiality over time and why this one may or may not reach that bar.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the existence of it has got to have some value to it. I mean, it can't, yes, my feeling. It's due diligence, as Dr. X points out. And by the way, Hadass Kasorla does admit that she is a recovering attorney herself. We're glad to have you here, Hadass. You always have a reasonable standard. That's what you got. That's very good. All right, let's jump more into this. Oh, let me ask you, and I find this interesting, about public opinion about breaches. Given the sheer volume of them, which they're high, I think people are like glassy-eyed from the volume of breaches out there. Is this a concern more just for public companies about breaches, like we don't want to get in trouble with the SEC, than it is with public opinion about breaches? What do you two think?
I'll start with, sadly, I believe that the consumer is numb. Because they might stop buying at that whatever retailer for a week or two, and be like, oh, you know what? I have to assume that now that because of this breach, their security is really, really good. They've already lost everything, so might as well go back.
People did go back to Target.
Exactly. I mean, most of any of these major breaches, from a retail perspective, they've all recovered very successfully. I would say though that same thing doesn't exist from a B2B standpoint. Let's use Microsoft as a different exception because they're so intertwined into the business of the world that nothing's going to really affect them like that. But SolarWinds, they're down They're down revenue. They're down 40% on their stock. It was a pretty big hit. I do believe that, again, use Dustin as an example, or any CISO out there. If a provider to you shows that they're have not done a good job with your data, like you're not going to renew with them. You're going to leave. Mm-hmm. And I do believe so. B2B holds people more accountable. Retail consumers are not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right. It's much easier for me as an individual consumer to switch to a different product if I feel so compelled. And I'll tell you, the first time my banking information was breached, I switched banks. Now, the last 4 or 5 times my banking information has been breached, I haven't done that. So it speaks to the numbness you're talking about. But in a B2B perspective, if there is a product I'm using, a company that I am trusting, and they get breached, and it's my determination they got breached because of their own sort of malfeasance, their own willingness to make the investments and do the hard things you need to do in order to be secure, then it's really easy for me to vote with my dollars and choose one of their competitors to do the same thing for me.
That is a very, very good distinction between consumer. And also, you also think about, even there's so many healthcare or care organizations that have been hit lately, it is difficult for people to want to leave their healthcare organization because it also may require them to leave their doctors, which people aren't often that eager to do, for that matter. And there is, and like you're saying, multiple banks, multiple healthcare organizations. Who's to say if I leave this one, the one I go to isn't going to be hit too? Because nobody thinks that one is more protected than the other. I don't believe.
But you do have to think.
No, and we all live in glass houses, David, so we don't throw stones either.
Yeah. I mean, there is an aspect of the hope that they clearly got a lot better because of that breach, right? The maturity significantly increased and the monitoring increased. But it's not just this doesn't exist just in cyber. I mean, let's look at any type of airline crash or whatever. You can say, oh, I want to avoid a certain type of plane, but so now are you going to pick a flight that's not direct? You're going to take a 2-hopper to. I think that then it's like, no, never mind.
Yeah, I know there's just so much we can control here. Sadly, I will say. Let me remind people. The link at the bottom of the screen is to join our event that's happening next week. That's Hacking SOC Automation. That's going to be on July 19th. We will not have a show the following week after that, just to let you know. But July 19th, we will have a show. And by the way, I don't know if we'll have it, but the Friday after Black Hat, I don't know if we're going to have a show or not. We'll find out. We'll see. Let's get to, get your questions in. I think we kind of touched upon this, but I'll just mention what Dr. X asks here. When does the meter start now that you know when you have to report? I mean, it's 4 days. I got to assume once there's internal information that that you know about it, you got to tell the SEC within 4 days, yes? I mean, I got to assume that's it.
Yeah, and David, that's the downside of having such a well-determined process for determining materiality. And you determine what are the variables that go into it and what are the thresholds for each variable before it becomes material. Now, once you have that information, because you have the established process, you can no longer drag your feet.
Okay. All right. We're going to be, in a few minutes, we'll be playing our game, Department of Yes. But please get your questions in. I have some more to ask. This is a good question. We haven't touched upon this. And how do CISOs, actually I'll ask you, Jason, to answer first, because it may be a little too sensitive for Dustin here. How do CISOs balance the need for rapid response with the threat of their own prosecution? Because this has been a concern. Like, how does if a breach happens and they don't want to be put in the crosshairs of the SEC themselves, how do they handle this in protecting themselves and also doing this quickly at the same time? And I know this is a lot of it depends here, but I want you to answer first, Jason.
Yeah. I think first, I tell CISOs that it's important to, especially when you went into a new organization, that you have D&O insurance, and that you also have an umbrella insurance, and that you have X amount of protections in case, right? Obviously, that doesn't cover if you are criminal liable, right? But for the most part, you should have the same protections that a CEO and a CFO have in an organization, because because this is starting to come up a lot more. So I think that is an important thing for CISOs to push for, ask for, and I'm seeing in the last 12 months, I'm seeing more CISOs get this than ever in history. And so they are, it's successful. It's really not very expensive. So it's not a hard, the only negative I get on this is when CISOs do push for that, oh, well, this other person, the CMO doesn't have it and the head of HR doesn't have it. It's like, no, but they're also not getting sued. So that's part one. I think that, as they balance this, I think that they also should be now having that protection. They should know that to feel comfortable to put their job on the line, they should be able to say, look, what we're doing is not right. I'm not okay with that. I'm not going to sign off on that. And and be able to walk away. But they should be protected in doing that, because they need to be able to say no to the organization and representing the shareholders and the customers as needed.
All right.
Yeah, and Jason, this is something I feel passionate about. You know my strong feelings. It's exactly that. First element is, before you take the title, make sure you've got an ironclad employment agreement. And it's got to be an employment agreement that you can initiate as well as the company can initiate, right? And that employment agreement has to give you some soft landing if you decide to leave. And with that comes then this concept of make sure there are hills that you are willing to die on. Right? If there are decisions the organization is making that are entirely compromising your ability to protect that organization, you have to decide when it's time to take that parachute and exit the organization. That's one. Two is the D&O insurance. I think that is critical. And that's something, again, given the prosecutions we've seen over the last 2 years, it's much more critical today than it maybe once was. The third thing I would recommend for people is, look into and get yourself a personal umbrella policy. This is something that gives you some supplemental coverage if the things that happened, the bad things that happened somehow spill over into your personal liability. I think that's pretty critical. Last thing I would say is make sure your D&O coverage, make sure that covers severability. So for any activity that you did while you were the CISO, even if you've been gone for 5 years, you want to make sure you're still covered under that D&O.
Let me ask you a question following up on that, Dustin, is what do you do if you're already a CISO, you're not applying for a job as CISO, and you want all the things you just mentioned, but you don't have them? What leverage do you have to do anything?
Ooh, yeah. Well, that's where ability to walk away becomes leverage for you. So right. In getting the D&O, if you don't have the D&O, but you have the employment agreement, and being willing to walk away is part of that. It's a hard thing, though, if you're in place, you like where you are, you like your leadership, you like your team, you're not looking at a different job. Then you're taking your chances until you do take that next job. Don't ever take the second job without it.
I think that if you're doing a good job and they like you, it's not a big ask, and that I do think you can ask for it. And they don't want to have to. To me, if they say no, I don't know. I almost think you might be better off somewhere else anyways.
Well, the other thing is you want to be on the same side as your company. Should something come down, you want to both be arguing together, not you for yourself and them for themselves, because that's going to be bad for both of you. So it would be in their best interest to give that to you as well. All right. We have a call that just came in.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right, we have lots of bad ideas. They're horrible. Hopefully some more good ideas have come in too. And yes, we do have a few more good ideas. I appreciate all your wisdom as well, but we're going to go through the bad ideas. And the way this works, Dustin and Jason, is I'm going to tell you one of these bad ideas in the Department of Yes. And unlike in the Department of No, where you're saying no to bad ideas, you're going to say yes to good ideas. So you have to find the silver lining on these bad ideas. Tell me why you actually want to deploy them, and you can't be facetious when you answer. And then I will.
Right, so we have to pick like one of them, or
no. I'm going to tell. I'm going to read it, and then you're going to argue why you want to actually deploy this thing that I'm telling you about. I'll start with Dustin on this one. Okay. Dustin, I think, is on board here. This one comes from Dwayne Grant. I like this one. I don't actually think it's that bad. I think this one, I think you can handle. Set the bar for materiality with your general counsel and board so high that you never actually have to disclose a breach to the SEC. Why do you want to do this, Dustin?
Oh, yes. I'd love to do this because it would limit the necessity for me to disclose, right? Happy to do that. I'm not sure that attorneys would be willing to do
No,
it.
but
So,
you all get on the same page. That's the whole point of this. Like
well,
you,
you've not met
you,
my
you and the
attorneys.
general counsel, you agree. The bar is this high. 95% of our data has to be exposed before we consider it material, something to that level. So, why do you want to do this? Oh, you're come on,
Are you asking me?
Jason. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jason. Oh,
Am I
thought-
done? I'm happy to keep talking.
Oh, no,
Funding.
no, sorry.
Listen. You want
Jason,
us
you go.
to
Argue.
to
Why
be
do you
at
want
that
to do
level?
this?
Because I'm going to argue that, all right, if you want me to be funded to that level, then let's talk about more funding, to be able to kind of essentially over secure the organization.
You don't.
To
But
where,
the thing is, it's not that the situation they over secure. It's quite the opposite in that you're setting the bar so high for materiality that so much can be exposed before it's material that you'll never essentially need to talk to the SEC. So it's quite the opposite of what you're saying.
Okay. Well, I think the only way it's a good idea is if you can get more funding. Other than, oh no, Dustin did a
I'm
much
giving you
better
a big
job.
boo on that one.
Or
All
if you
right,
can
go ahead.
Oh, well, I would caveat it with transferring the risk as well. So the CEO would be signing off on all the risk equations.
Oh,
that
now
we're
there you
accepting.
go.
That's a good one.
All right,
We've got a winner.
good job. All right, hold it. We got one more though. I'm going to start with you, Jason, on this. This one comes from Aksa Taylor. And Aksa says, wait for the hackers. By the way, this is true because we've seen this threat from ransomware. Wait for the hackers to report to the SEC that you did not report it. And this one we've seen before. Why do you want to just wait for them to do that? I mean, heck, some of them are already making this threat already.
Well, it certainly makes your job a lot easier around about the energy and the debate you have to have with legal and internal around materiality. Second is that's also saving you a lot of money on pen testing. You can just use them.
Well, they've already broken in. All right, why do you want to do this, Dustin?
David, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to lie to you. This is the worst idea I've ever heard.
Aksa, sorry. Well, that speaks highly for Aksa, is that she came up with an idea so bad you couldn't figure a way to spin it. So kudos on you. All right. We're continuing on. Not as many questions as I thought, but if you want to get a few more questions before we end. Oh, let me remind you now, and you know what, I'll throw it out right now, and you get from now until we end, which is 17 minutes from now. If you type the word meetup : just the word meetup and colon, and any question you have, it can be about the topic we're discussing today or anything else, we're going to bring that and ask it to the entire community during our after party, which will be on Discord, and that will be at the end of the hour here. So just type that in. And the other thing I want to mention, if you want that warm handoff to Cyera, which will help you with the discovery and categorization of your data, please go to the poll and select one of the options, and we will make that warm handoff for you there. All right, questions. What should we be doing? And I think we've asked this question a lot already, but maybe I'll get a summary from you, Dustin, because maybe you're going to add more that we haven't mentioned. But as we're waiting for finding out what this materiality really means, what should we all be doing at this time? And we've touched on it a lot, but please add to that.
Yeah, and again, I'll reiterate, glass house, I'm not throwing stones, but David, we're 20 plus weeks into a healthcare industry breach, and we still don't know what data was exposed in that breach. And that for me is a pretty scary sign of what we all probably would suffer if we were in the same position. Mm-hmm. So the first thing we need to be doing is we need to first really understand where our data is, because all these new technology advances have replicated our data in multiple different places. Once we've done that, I think a very concerted effort to reduce our data footprint, reduce it by reducing copies of data, reduce it by maybe picking a handful of database technologies and not choosing every database technology, things like that. So first let's determine where all that data is. Second, let's reduce it. And then third, let's take a look at the intersection between identity and data, and minimize the minimum necessary access to the greatest degree possible.
Like, if you don't mind, let's go through some of these spaces that we're talking. So, first of all, it's just the sheer number of applications holding data that are, quote, approved by the business. But then there's the issue of data that's being handled in shadow IT, data that's just sitting in multiple copies of files on a OneDrive, data that is sitting on hard drives or AWS instances that is old and you don't know where the heck it's useless to you now and it just shouldn't be out there. It's only creating risk, no value. What else am I missing here? Dustin, add to that equation here.
Well, it's the multiplication of database technologies, and people have favorites, right? So somebody decides that it's time that they start tinkering with Aurora, and so they make another copy of your data in Aurora, right? Or they choose some other nuanced AI technology that uses yet a different data backend, or perhaps you sign a big contract with another one of the hyperscalers, right? And where your data used to always be in AWS, now it's in Azure, and now it's also in GCP and Alibaba and wherever else, whatever the next flavor is going to be. So there's lots of things that are I think driving it. Some of it is just the simplicity and ease of use, and I would go so far as to call it laziness at times of, gosh, I know this one database technology better than I know this other DMS technology, so I'm just going to use that even though I have to copy the data over.
That is a very, very good point. You've been dealing with this firsthand a lot with multiple different customers. Maybe you've seen behavior happening more in certain industries than others in terms of data sprawl. Jason, what have you seen?
Well, I mean, honestly, everything Dustin answered, it's like spot on, exactly it. The only, I'd say every industry's that got the same problem, and it's sprawled, it's everywhere. And it's again, it's a lot of unstructured, where somebody's gone from structured to unstructured. And I don't believe any industry and most every organization cannot answer the questions that Dustin laid out, as that the challenge is, right, with the Change Healthcare and UHG stuff going on. I mean, that's everybody's in that spot, and I think that's the light that needs to be shined on this. It needs to everybody needs to be working on. The only other things, if you kind of ask what else, I do think there's, you can even extend to third parties more than just, the third parties you're managing. You could go to third parties and fourth party. That's hard. And then the other is just, the amount of organizations that let personal devices connect to sensitive information, right? Because as soon as that happens, it's impossible to control, right? I mean, the easiest thing is to go onto your personal iPhone and forward, open, using the Apple client, right, and forward out and select your other email box and forward an email. That it just, so I think that there's a large number of gaps, and these are starting this all back. To do security strategy well, you have to know your data, and this is why I think data is becoming, I think, the fastest growing and hottest topic other than AI, but driven by AI in all of IT. And all of IT, with chief data officers, CIOs, and CISOs, I think data in general is the hottest topic there is.
All right, let me do this. I'm gonna close up our discussion here, and then I'm gonna come back to you and ask you, what have we not discussed that we should have discussed right here? So hold tight. If you've not clicked the link at the bottom of the screen for registering for next week's event, please click on that now. I just want to wrap a few things up, and then we're about 10 minutes away, actually a little over 10 minutes away. I do want to thank our sponsor, Cyera, for sponsoring this very event, and we'll have some time for questions. So if you got some last minute questions, please get them in there. Remember, actually about a little over, 100 minutes from right now, we'll be doing our Cybersecurity Headlines Weekend Review Show. We got Andrew Kanata, who is the CISO of Primo Water, who will be our guest on that, summing up and giving some color to the biggest stories in cybersecurity news this week. Also, stick around for our meetup. That's a sort of a shot of what our Discord looks like. What you'll see is on the left-hand side at the bottom, you'll see one called Cyber Group Meter or something like that. Click on that, and we will all join that. If we get to be a big crowd, we'll split everybody up. But please enter your meetup questions. We see the Super Cyber Meetup. Yeah, it'll say Super Cyber Meetup on Discord. So make sure you're on Discord and can do that as well. And then if you want to sponsor Super Cyber Friday, let me know. We got actually a lot available right now for just specifically this show. Just email us at info@cisoseries.com. All right, I'm going to start with you, Dustin. What have we not talked about here with regards to breach, materiality or significance of materiality that we should be discussing?
Well, we haven't really talked about the punitive response that usually happens in a security organization when something happens. I've always thought it was counterintuitive that when a breach happens, the first thing you do is fire the A team. That just never seems to make real sense to me. And
do you think that's happening a lot now? I know we used to see that a lot. I don't see that happening a lot now. What do you think?
Well, I think they're much more stealthy about it today than they used to be. What we see now is that you end up with a CISO in name who really has no authority, and we've seen that in a number of cases where the CISO just quietly goes into the distance. So there's that piece of it. We also didn't talk about the insights as data that come from AI and how we need to be protecting those as well. And again, we're talking about new technology where a number of our legacy tools simply don't exist. I mean, try to get your DLP to protect your vector database for your AI. It's not going to work. So in that context, prompts as data within AI become data you need to protect, as do of course whatever the outputs of the AI are. We have to worry about those things. I mean, I could go on forever, David. There's a ton of things we haven't talked about, but all of them will be another show, I think.
All right. I throw this to you, Jason. What have we not? And we still have time to talk about these issues, but I want to hear Jason, and then we'll discuss it in our last few minutes of the show.
I think that the first big thing to me is the reality is everybody is spending a lot of money on trying to determine the stuff after the breach, and it's a lot of outside players that are thousands, 2,000, 2,200, 2,500. The numbers keep going up on how much are being paid per hour for outside counsel and Big Four to spend a lot of time on this matter, when you can have technology that can help speed that up. Right, that this is being done manually with very slow tools, and so that's to me an easy fix. And generally, I mean, I've asked every CISO I've talked to since joining Cyera, and it's like hundreds of CISOs. Okay, when this has happened, how much did you spend? And the lowest was not on IR, on Big Four and lawyers, and the lowest was 300. Most average 7 figures. There's a few that are 20 million, 30 million, 40 million, and one was 150. And that's a big that's like kind of a big wow moment for me on how much is being spent. In fact, when I ask the big IR guys, Signia and CrowdStrike and Mania, hey, like I had this conversation with those leaders, and what I'm hearing from them is they're probably getting 25% of an IR incident, that the rest is going to Big Four and lawyers because of the amount spent on the materiality and the discovery part.
Hey, and David, Andrew said something in the chat, though I don't want to let go by without addressing it, because I think he's dead on too, and that is one of the things that our employers have failed to understand is when you cloud transform a company, you have to cloud transform its security. When you digitally transform a company, you have to digitally transform its security. When you AI enable a company, you have to AI enable the security. And each one of those things needs to be a targeted investment in the security side of the organization. Because I think most of the people on this phone that carry that CISO title have had to do that off the side of their desks, while IT is getting the investment and security is not.
By the way, Axa mentioned that the invite invalid. I got that invite invalid, but I was able to still get in, although I am currently a member of the CISO Series Discord. So anyone who's not been a member of the CISO Series Discord, please, I'm sorry that I'm sort of disconnecting here for a second. If you get that invite invalid and can't get in, please let us know. Please give it a try right now. All right.
I had the same problem.
Can you actually get in though, or no? When you did you click on the new link? Try the new link right there.
I'll try it. I'll try it. Yeah.
Go
ahead.
And I'm sorry. Please update the link also in our button at the bottom of the screen.
I like Andrew Wilder. He's been very active today.
Yes.
I like
He's been a
his,
great resource for the CISO series. Thank you, Andrew. He's been our
you
guest on
know,
other shows. Go ahead,
why
Jason.
why CISO should have an innovation budget. I think I think that's very important and not talked about much at all. And it is extreme. We have an active adversary that is innovating, and I think CISOs, they need an innovation budget. They need to be able to like have design partnerships with companies to design to their specific requirements, because we're all not the same, and we have unique problems. And so that I think that's a really important thing. And sometimes it is a startup that has 50 people that's solving a problem that's brand new that you're experiencing. And a lot of times it isn't easy in large organizations to be able to engage with that size of a company. But I think it's extremely important for our industry. It's very unique to our industry.
Mm-hmm. So I got, just so you know, thank you very much for that. I'm just sort of trying to address the technical issues that are happening with Discord. I clicked the button at the bottom of the screen. I don't know if that's been updated, but it still said invalid link as well. Although this link, let me check it here. Let me see if it says it. No, the link that is in the chat works fine. So can we fix the link that's on the button, please? So that works, because we're going to jump into that in 4 minutes as well. All right. We are just a few minutes out. Last comments from you, Dustin. I know you hit a bunch of them right there. Anything else you want to add here with the little bit of time we got? Dustin?
Oh, again, it's going to take every one of us as CISOs to step up and show some leadership within our organizations. It's an uncomfortable place to be as we move from what have traditionally been our technical roles to much more business leader roles. But we need to elevate these conversations around data sprawl, around the need to minimize data, around the need to find and protect data. We need to elevate those conversations up to the business level, because we're preaching to the choir when we're talking to IT about that. And until both us and IT get the budget to do these things, these things aren't going to get done unless we have a major incident. We don't want those things.
Jason, any last words on this topic? And by the way, please, a plug for Cyera. Anything else additional? If you have not clicked that darn bar chart to register, or not register, ask for a warm handoff to Cyera, please do that. Any last comments about Cyera or
Just
anything
that,
else on this topic?
what myself and we at Cyera want to do is really just help the community. And I think that just engaging and helping think through this. Okay, where is your most critical environments? Helping do a risk assessment just to quickly understand, like, okay, what is the situation? What's your maturity level? What's your data security strategy? So helping at a strategic level as you build this plan, whether it's something for next year or year two. And I think also this running through a readiness for the materiality question. Like, if this happened, would you be ready? Are you ready for the conversations? Are you ready for the questions? And how fast would you be able to get the answers? I think that's a big thing that's going to help our industry and help every enterprise out there.
Yeah, Jason, that's a way better said, and that it comes down to, if you wait until the breach has happened and the house is on fire before you start addressing your data sprawl problem, it's going to be too late.
Yeah, well, that's where the costs go astronomical, like the prices you were just mentioning, Jason. All right, let's wrap this sucker up. I want to thank you, Jason Clark, who is with Cyera, our wonderful sponsor for today, and also Dustin Wilcox for Elevance Health. Thank you both. You were both phenomenal on the show. I greatly appreciate it. All right, everybody. The link at the bottom now works. It does work. I've tested it myself. So if you're on Discord and you want to join us, and we do have a couple of good comments, like the innovation budget for a CISO. I do like that. That's from Andrew Wilder. Please click on the link below and join us over there. We're going to be chatting for another half hour, and we'd love to have time to chat with you. And also, you can break up into more private chats, too. All right. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to Aaron and Rich and Andrew for producing this. Take us out, Aaron.